I'm like seriously perplexed by the response that I just got when I uploaded a update video, basically just saying the album was going to drop this week and what was going on with the raffle prizes, etc. And that I was lagging on some of the stuff, but that I got a good huge chunk of it done yesterday at the post office, and people like really were upset that like my consistency has wavered since the beginning of the channel. I thought I was pretty clear that I had multiple projects that I was juggling. I'm in post production in the documentary. That's very time consuming. We're on pre production on the film version of Wasting Talent. It's called Love in Vain. I was getting the album done, and I owe the final draft of my new novel, June Gloom, by early February. So it's like I have a lot of creative projects that I was doing way before I started the channel, that takes priority right now because I have actual deadlines. And then I try to find time at the end of the day to come home and record this stuff. I know that people appreciate the content, but I mean, like, people were saying like, I unsubscribed to you. I just can't do it. I just can't deal with the inconsistencies anymore, bro. It's so inconsistent. Ooh. It's like, whoa, dude. I didn't know that it was that. I'm like, if the content means that much to you, dude, I will really make an effort to really do it every day. I didn't know that people care that much about my dope fiend fucking life. I'm just like talking about experiences I've had. But this guy like really got in his vagina about it. It's like, look, man, if you haven't already, I suggest that you get a sharp pair of scissors and you cut off your dick and you mail it to someone that can use it better than you. It's like, I'm gonna unsubscribe to you. Ooh. It's like, dude, really? Like, fuck. And then, like, so many other people are saying the same thing, and I'm like, I feel bad. Should I feel bad? But I do. I feel like I let you guys down because I just don't have the time to upload as frequently as I once did. And I'd fallen into a depression when I lost Paul, and then lost Nick shortly after that. No, I'm not smoking crack or shooting heroin. You have acne. Your eyes are pinned. It's like, dude, if I was using drugs, you'd never see a video from me. I would never post something when I'm loaded, because when I'm loaded, I get loaded to not function. Like, there's people that drink to get annihilated, to get drunk past oblivion. That's how I use drugs and alcohol. I'm certainly never been a functioning drug addict. But, so I just wanted to say that. It's like, I really didn't know that I was dealing with such a sensitive bunch of people. And, now I know. I apologize if, my lack of content has made your vagina burn. There's probably home remedies on Google for it. But, let's get into the story, because I think that we're at a good point of the Relapse story. I'm trying to do like the shout outs and all that on Sundays when I do lives now. I'm going to do live every other week just so that I can catch up with raffle winners and then do a new batch. So every other week. Next Sunday I'm going to do another live, and I'll try to do a video every day so that people aren't sending... I get scathing emails like, you got me sober with your courage to share your story, and then you didn't upload for 4 days and I relapsed and it is your fault. And I'm like, what the fuck is going... I don't know if people are joking, but then I see the comments and I'm just... Sorry, this has already gone on for 4 minutes. Let's get into the story. So this is the Relapse part 8, the Ocho. So where we had left off last time, I had relapsed with Haley. And it was interesting because it was a time in my life where I had really wanted to get sober. I think I had like 60 days when I finally relapsed with her. And just because codependency is like another element of my disease, I always have to be with someone. I can never be alone. That codependency took me back out, because to be with her, I almost felt like I had to relapse. Or maybe that was just my addiction playing tricks on me. Whatever the case, I did relapse. We're selling used panties on Craigslist as our hustle. And we're making enough money off that, believe it or not, to sustain our habit. And then I get a call from my PO. And it's clear that the sober living hadn't notified him that I had taken off, which is good. But he wanted me to come into the office. Now, at this point, they weren't really testing me. I wasn't on color coding anymore. Anytime I did office visits before this, they never tested me. And even though in the years that would follow this, I would always go in there prepared, whether that be using one of those detox drinks or having fake piss or having some way to beat the test. This particular time, I just decided to go in there with some sort of junky optimism, thinking that I'd be able to get over on them, that they wouldn't test me. You know, I'd be able to talk my way out of it. I mean, that's just me being loaded and feeling invincible. So I go check in with him. Remember, I have cellulitis. I've lost functionality in one of my hands, so I have this little gimp hand. It's like not a shrunken hand, but it looks like that because it's like curled like that. So I go in there and, you know, I look like I have this Jurassic Park look. My PO takes one look at me. He doesn't even say hi. Usually he's courteous with me. And he's just like, oh yeah, you're giving me a UA today. And I'm just like, fuck. So I go into the bathroom with him and, you know, there's the little mirrors that surround you and take my pants off. My little root beer barrel dick. And I'm peeing and he like makes eye contact with me. He's like, hey man, you dirty? It's like weird. And I was like, no. I'm like peeing. I'm like shrugging my shoulders in shame, peeing, and my piss is like it looks like Tang. That's like how dirty I am. Like you can like literally see the toxins in the UA bottle. It's like orange piss. That's how dirty I am. It's like polluted pee. And you know, he does the little panel, and I came up dirty for cocaine, which I didn't even remember doing. I mean, we were just really doing meth and heroin, but I think we had smoked crack like maybe a couple of days before that. Came up dirty for cocaine, opiates, methamphetamine, and benzos. And like I was dirty for so many panels that he didn't know if I was dirty or clean. Because I came up for pretty much everything. He thought maybe it was a faulty test, and he showed it to another PO, and the PO was like, oh no. That guy's dirty for like 4 different things. And my PO's like, what's going on? I'm like, all right, just to be honest with you, I relapsed. And I'd like to go back to treatment. You know, like pretty much saying, please don't send me back to prison right now over this. It's my first dirty. It's my first time I'm in violation. So he's telling me that I'm going to get violated for it, but that it would be my best interest to check back into the treatment center. So I get back, you know, in the car, and I tell Haley, I'm like, damn, I just got it dirty for like 4 different things. And she's like, at this point, she's not looking good. You know, she's really pale. She'd been shooting up in her feet, and she had cellulitis in her feet, and she like couldn't walk on one leg now. Like we were all infected, and she was scabbed. We both looked horrible. And she was pale, and she was getting less and less lucid. She was kind of saying like incoherent stuff, and I only noticed it right when I got back in the car. And I'm like, are you all right? You don't look good. And she's kind of mumbling that she's okay. And that night, for some reason, we had enough money for drugs, but we didn't have enough money for a hotel. And she had called her dad, and she got her dad to get us like a room at like a Best Western, like some nice hotel. That particular night, she, you know, was sitting in a chair in the corner of the room. We had some other guy over there that was delivering us the heroin, and he was like doing a shot with me. We were like by the TV, and she's like in the corner sitting in a chair shooting up in her foot. We're not really paying attention to her, and I look over, and she just tips over and goes out. She ODs. And, you know, we start freaking out, and we kind of start slapping her a little bit, pouring cold water on her, giving her CPR, and I got her to come back probably after about 2 minutes. She went from like that real like fish scale blue back to some semblance of coloring. But it was like a close call. I mean, she had gone out. But when she came out from the overdose, when I got her respiratory rate back to normality, she was noticeably more incoherent than before she had gone out. Like, now she was like really saying stuff that didn't make sense. And I knew that I needed to go back to treatment. You know, the feds is kind of, it's not like state parole. State parole, you go into the office, and if you piss dirty, they're like, they can arrest you. Like, the PO has the ability to arrest you. It's not like that on federal probation. They don't have the authority to put hands on you, to cuff you. If you're going to go to jail, if you're going to get locked up by the feds on a violation, they have to have U.S. Marshals arrest you. And they do it in some really scandalous ways. Like, I mean, I've heard of people going to the bar and like, my friend was a bartender, and he was serving drinks, and these two guys had come in, and they were ordering drinks from him for like an hour, talking to him. And they ordered another drink. He went to go pour it for them, and they put cuffs on him. They were U.S. Marshals, like, you know, masquerading as just like bar hopping guys. Or I've heard about them dressing up as like FedEx, you know, couriers, and they go to deliver a package, and you open the front door and they tackle you. So the U.S. Marshals are really sneaky, but you rarely get arrested on site at like a U.S. probation office. So it's the kind of thing where when you get a violation with them, you're not looking at 30 days in jail. You're not looking at 60 days. You're looking at significant time, years. You can do 3-4 years on a violation. And anything under a year, you do 100% of your time. So if they give you 9 months on a violation, you do 9 months. If they give you 2 years, you're doing 87%. Anything over a year is 87%. Anything under is 100%. So even if they give you a 10-month violation, 11-month violation, that's like a year of time right there. So they give you bigger violations, but they don't arrest you right there and then. There's like, you know, there's due process. Usually when you violate, you know, you have to go to court first, and you have to present your case to the judge. It's just like sentencing for like your big case. So, I mean, he told me he was violating me for the dirty, but like I said, it wasn't the kind of thing that was going to happen immediately, but he had suggested that I check myself back into treatment because Haley was so incoherent. You know, I had suggested that we go back, and she's just kind of like, you know, mumbling. She can't speak to me. And at the point where she like lost her lucidity, I was like, okay, I'm going to call and I'm going to get us both in. I'm just going to drive us to the treatment center. So I called and I explained the situation to the intake people. I told them who I was and that I was with Haley, and that, you know, we wanted to come back. And I had told my parents that as well. At this point, they knew that I had relapsed. So La Ventana said we could come back. And we end up going back there, and I remember whatever staff was receiving us took one look at Haley and I, and were like, there's no way we can let you in here unless you go to the hospital, because you guys look like you're knocking on death's door. I mean, my hand's gimped. She can't walk on one leg. They had to pull a wheelchair up for her because she was like, you know, like passed out in the passenger seat. And they're like, all right, come on, get out of the car. And she like tried to step up, and she just collapsed because her leg didn't work. So they had to like wheel her with a wheelchair. And then you have me like trailing behind, limping because I have some abscess on my leg, and I have like this little gimp hand. Looked absurd. We looked like circus freaks. So they made us go to the hospital. And we hadn't showered for like the whole time we were on the run, you know, or on this particular drug run. And I remember getting to the hospital, and they took our vitals, and her heart rate was of alarm. You know, when you first go to like an ER, they take your vitals, and you'll get expedited service if your vitals are dire. And hers were. I forget what her pulse was, but it was something that was alarming for the hospital. So they took her in right away. They wheeled her in. I was sitting in the waiting room with this little gimp hand, and like one of the staff from the rehab was escorting me, and they were kind of like talking to me, just asking me what was going on. Finally, I go into the ER, and they brought me into, you know, like one of those little, there's like I don't even know what to call it, like a sheet on both sides. It's like a little cubicle kind of makeshift room that they have in the ER. I remember I go in there and the nurse told me to take off my clothes and to get into a gown. Right as I'm doing that, I mean, like, my smell, this like just rancid odor permeated this small cubicle, which wasn't even like an enclosed room. Like, I mean, it's made out of like sheets, but like the smell was arresting. And the doctor walked in right as I'm changing. And the first thing he asked me is, how long have you guys been on the street? I was like, we're not on the street. I drive a BMW. What are you talking about? And he just kind of looked at me, and he didn't have to say it, but it was very obvious that he was talking about the smell, and that I knew that he was talking about the smell, and it was like so embarrassing. And then, like, I'm sitting on the bed. See, the rehab wanted us to be checked out. They just didn't want to take us back into the detox until we got like a medical clearing from the hospital. So they're running like blood tests on me, etc. And a priest comes in to my little cubicle area, and he tells me that there's a really good chance that my girlfriend's gonna die. That she has like a 20% chance to live, and that they're reading her passages or whatever they do, whatever priests do, like when you're about to die at the hospital. I was like, what the fuck? Are you serious? And, you know, they explained to me, because she was bulimic on top of being on this really gnarly heroin and meth run and all these other drugs that we were doing sporadically and on that run as well, that her potassium levels had dropped to a very dangerous level. And because she had cellulitis, the sepsis was like poisoning her, and she didn't have the potassium levels to fight it off. I'm not a doctor, and I could be reiterating that wrong, but it was like something to that effect. I was like, are you, like, she might die? And he's like, I mean, the priest just told me very bluntly, he's like, she has a 20% chance of living. And I was so numbed out by the drugs, I didn't even really process what he was saying. I was just like, oh. They're like, do you want to go say goodbye to her? I was like, goodbye to her? I was like, sure. So they wheeled me to her, and she was like in a bed, and she had like oxygen on her, and like it looked really crazy. I was like, oh my God. And she didn't even recognize me. She was so far gone at that point that, you know, I just kind of, you know, apathetically touched her arm, and I was like, all right, goodbye. And then they like wheeled me away. I like tapped her. That's like all I did. That's all I could do. I was just like, I was so fucked up in the head anyway from the run I was on. So they take me back to the room, the cubicle thing. They clear me, and they end up bringing me back to the treatment center, but without her. I have no idea what's going on with her. When you go into any sort of detox or rehab, generally they have you on a blackout period where you can't use a cell phone, you can't have any communication with the outside world. And as soon as I get there, I'm completely demonized by the rest of the patients that are at this rehab. I mean, they had all been told that a totally different version of what had actually happened. They were told that there was a girl there named Haley, and that there was a guy there named Ryan, and that Haley was doing really well, and that Ryan had moved to North Hollywood and had relapsed, and then he had somehow like smuggled Haley in a cell phone, and I had convinced her to leave with me to relapse as well, which is not what happened at all. So they thought that I was like some predatory dude that, you know, got her to leave for my own selfish sexual gratification purposes, or however they had framed it. But I was like, I mean, I was vilified. Like, people like thought I was a piece of shit when I got there, and I like I was like defending myself. I'm like, dude, like she might die right now. And they had heard that too, that like not only had I, you know, I was one of the reasons that she had relapsed, she might be dying now, and I might be the reason that she dies. So people were treating me like shit. I got very close to getting in a couple fights in detox, like while I'm all benzoed out, and you know, I spit on some guy when he was kind of talking shit to me, and like staff had to get between us, and it was just like a very ugly period, and I had no idea what was going on with her. Now, I had told her when she was in her, incoherent state, like phase, right at the end there. I said, like, when I decided to check us back into La Ventana, I was like, hey, if for some reason you need to communicate with me, my cell phone number by heart because she had memorized it. Leave me a message on my voicemail, and that's how we can communicate. So when I got off the black, I asked the staff every day. I'm like, what's up with Haley? Did she dead? Did she live? What's up? And like the more that I detoxed, the more I started coming back to earth, and I started realizing the gravity of the situation, like how serious it was. Like, she might die, and part of me did feel responsible for it. I did take her out of treatment. I didn't take her out of treatment with the intention of relapsing with her. I actually took her out of treatment because she said that, drugs had been smuggled in there, and she wanted me to take her out of that bad environment because she didn't want to relapse. But all of it started weighing on me, and when I got off the blackout period, I was still in detox. I called my cell phone, just seeing if by chance she had left a message, and she had. And she said that she got out of the hospital and that she was at like an eating disorder house, so these are different houses. There's like a male house, there's a few male houses, a few female houses for the drug addiction part of this program, but there's also a sister program that's for eating disorders, and that's where she was. Completely different house, and there was like strict orders that we were to have no contact. And she was telling me this over the phone. She's like, they have me in the eating disorder program because I'm dual diagnosis, because I'm bulimic, and I'm also an addict. But, they don't want us to have any communication, but let's communicate this way. So I transitioned from the detox to the actual residential part, and we started communicating via, like, she would leave me voicemail messages. She would leave me a voicemail message, and then I would change my voicemail greeting to give her a message back. And what we started doing is they were bringing the girls from the eating disorder house to outside NA and AA meetings, and we started getting really slick and figuring out what the scheduling would be, because it was kind of discretionary, upon the patients at the house. Like, we'd take a vote. Does anyone want to go to this speaker meeting or, this book study meeting? And we kind of all vote. And I would just, at this point, people stopped demonizing me because they got to know me, and like they started just not looking at me like I was a piece of shit. I explained my side of the story. I'm like, yeah, this is what happened, and people believe me. That is what happened. And so I started making friends there again, and I started persuading people to vote for the meetings that I knew she was going to be at. So we got caught a couple times at meetings. We would see each other, and we were like talking, and we continued this very weird codependent relationship, which is absolutely toxic when you're in treatment because it distracts you from focusing on what you need to focus on, which is recovery, fixing the underlying issues that are making you, relapse in the first place. And by the way, my GIMP hand had slowly started like sprouting open like some, damaged flower, and it started kind of working again. But I wasn't focused on rehab. I wasn't focused on recovery. I was just focused on her. And we even got to a point where we were like, a house could call the other house, but they had to be like, you had to be on a list. So I would like pretend that I was her brother, and I would call from my house, and then they started figuring it out, and they busted us a number of times, and they were getting mad at us, and they were making it so that we just wouldn't have communication. And we were never in groups together, and they started figuring out that we were calling each other, so they took that communication away. And then, she still could leave messages on my voicemail. So it had regressed back to that by the end. We were there for about a month, and my dad talked about this on a Frank Friday. One day, he had come to speak at the rehab. He was very involved with Al-Anon, and, obviously his life had been personally affected by my addiction for so long that he wanted to share his insights, what he had learned, mistakes he had made, what had helped him with the patients and also with some of the parents, because it was like a family day there. So he came into the very sweet, nice sharing for this group setting. And around that, like right after he had left, I went and I checked my voicemail because we were communicating that way. And she told me that she was going to leave again. She said she couldn't take it anymore and that she wanted to leave. And she said that, she was probably going to resort back to prostitution. And I think she said that because she knew that that would like make me want to leave to like protect her somehow. Now, my PO knew that I was in treatment. And he knew that he had told me, he came to visit me maybe like 2 weeks after I got like finished the detox phase of it and I had transitioned into the residential. And he had told me that if I left treatment again, that not only he was going to violate me for the dirty drug test that I already gotten for those 4 substances, but he was going to violate me for absconding, which is like evading, which is like running away from your supervision obligations. So there was a lot on the line. He said, you leave again, and this is what's going to happen. Because he knew what had happened at the sober living, and I think he had figured out that I had essentially manipulated him into going to the sober living in the first place so that I'd have more freedom. So now he wanted me there, and he was talking about he wanted me there for like 6 months, 6 to 9 months. Statistically, the longer you're in treatment, the more effective it's going to be. So, I was in a really depressed place. I didn't want to be there. They were keeping me from communicating with my new girlfriend, even though it was a fucking joke of a relationship. And when she had left that message that she was leaving, she basically said, hey, I'm going to resort to prostitution. I have this girl's cell phone. Here's the number. So I called the number. I talked to her, and I tried to talk her out of leaving. And she's like, no, fuck that. I've already made up my mind. I'm going. You can come with me or you can stay there. And I'm like, all right, but you realize that if I leave with you, that I'm definitely going back to prison. I'll leave just because I don't want you out on the street. You're in an area that you're not familiar with. I don't want anything bad to happen to you. But I just want you to know that this is a decision I can't take back. So I'm going to go to prison for leaving and protect you. We'll only have so long for a drug run, and then I'm going back to the feds, and that's it. So are you sure you want to do this? And she's like, yeah, I'm leaving. I'm like, all right, then I'll come with you. So she told me to meet her at, I forget where it was. I don't know, actually she didn't even say to meet at a specific place. She was like maybe 4 miles away from me. And she's like, I'm going to start walking towards you. You start walking towards me right now. And eventually we're going to intersect. I said, okay, cool. So I left, and a couple of my good friends there that I'd made were like, dude, what are you thinking? You're tripping, bro. Like, you're going to go back to the feds over some hood rat that doesn't give a fuck about you. She's sicker than you are. What are you thinking? And I'm just like, no, I'm going. Like, once an addict makes up their mind, that's it. It's very, very hard once you've made the decision to relapse. And I consider just this behavioral lapse a relapse in itself. It's very hard to talk yourself out of that decision. And I had good intentions, or at least my addictive mind always presents these things as good intentions, even though I don't know what the fuck it was. It was just that, like, I felt so empty off drugs, and like having an Insta relationship made me feel somewhat full again, and I was craving not feeling empty anymore. I just needed to feel something again. So that was like part of the reason that I left. So I left, even though people pleaded with me not to go. And, I walked a couple miles and I saw her, and she looked guilty. She knew what she was doing, and she's just like, what do we do now? I'm like, how much money do you have? She's like, I got like $20. And so first thing we do is we go to the liquor store and we get liquor. And I forget what we got. It was some sort of like fire, tastes like atomic fireballs. I have no idea what that is. It was some girly drink. We end up drinking that, and we get like a decent buzz. She's a full-blown alcoholic. At this point, I'm not at all. And I remember being more drunk than she was. And then she got some girl from the eating disorder house to give us a ride to Santa Barbara. Because that was my suggestion. I'm like, hey, we should get a ride to Santa Barbara. I have more resources there. You know, it's better than being stranded on the street in Thousand Oaks trying to sling fucking used panties, you know? She's like, all right. So this girl gives us a ride to Santa Barbara. I go to my best friend Jeff's house, and I just kind of show up there with Haley, and he's just like, you know, this has happened multiple times where I'm just kind of like showing up at his house in bad shape. I mean, I had originally relapsed with him, and then I relapsed again when Caitlin had left me, or Casey, sorry, Caitlin. When Casey had left me. And now I'm showing up with this girl that I just broke out of rehab with, and he knew the situation, he knew what the stakes were. He knew that him seeing me at his front door meant that I had busted out, I'd AWOL'd from rehab again, and that I was probably going back to prison. And he's just like, pretty much lecturing me, like, dude, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know, I'm drunk, you know, I'm like trying to justify it to him. And somehow we got $100. I don't remember, maybe she had her family wire it. I don't remember, but somehow we had $100. We had just enough to get a gram of heroin, and then we needed like $30 more to get a motel room. And Jeff was like, look, I'll give you the money for the motel room. He didn't know we got the heroin. So dropped us off at some seedy motel. There's not a lot of seedy motels in Santa Barbara, but this was probably like the most seedy. It's called Hacienda. It's on Upper State, and it's some shot out, you know, typical trap house like motel, just in a nice town. We go there, and we had a gram of heroin. I remember we had to, like, getting the rig was like harder than getting the heroin. I had to like call a bunch of people I know, and someone had to come deliver one, and finally we had like one rig, and we just started pigging out on the heroin. Now I'm already drunk, and you know, I'm making the shots for Haley, and what I'm doing is I'm making myself like big, thick black ones. Remember, I just bust out of rehab. We'd been there like a month again, so I had no tolerance, but I'm making like dark shots, like dangerously dark shots. I'm already drinking, and then I'm giving her like super diluted shots. You know, I'm like, oh, I'll make up the shots for both of us. I'm like the chef, and I'm like giving her these like bunk-ass little diluted shots, and I'm doing like real ones. I do one, get really high, I'm like nodding in and out of consciousness, and it was like the kind of high, you know, there's different shades of high when it comes to heroin. There's like, you know, you get high and you get kind of itchy and you get kind of grouchy, your voice gets, you know, hoarse. That's like one level of being high. Another level is that you're kind of like nodding in and out and just, you know, like kind of going into some blissful dream place and then coming back to. And then there's like another level where you're like just about to die, and you're like in that limbo between consciousness and death, and you nod out, and then you come to and just say something completely random, like, maybe I should start doing brochow porn. And like whoever, you're like at a bowling alley, and people are like, what the fuck are you talking about? And you're like, and you have no idea what you just said. You say something completely out of context and something completely random and arbitrary. That's how I was this night, you know, just like nodding in and out and saying random stuff. And I don't remember it happening, but apparently I OD'd that night. As I woke up in the hospital. I woke up in Cottage Hospital. She was with me. And, you know, like paramedics had to come get me at the hotel room, and I had gone out, you know. I was in that state where I was going in and out, and I was saying random stuff. And then I did another shot on top of that, and that just took me over the edge. I went out. She tried to resuscitate me. She couldn't do it. She was left with no option but to call the paramedics, and she ended up getting to the hospital somehow. She didn't go in the ambulance. I forget how she got there, but it doesn't matter. She was there, and she was, you know, I was feeling like shit. And I was like, what happened? And she's like, you OD'd. And you were being a pig last night. And, you know, somebody came and they were trying to like tell me I need to get into treatment. I was like, yeah, whatever, I want to leave. And they still wanted to supervise me for a while, but I left AMA. We left the hospital. It's like, I don't know, 5:30, 6. It's just starting to get light. It's like 6 in the morning or something. And you know, forget what my plan was. And I forget where we got money. We got more money again. Her dad was sending her money because she said that she was on the street, and her dad's like a big time enabler. So he was sending her money, and that's how we had gotten the original money, and that's how we got this money. So we had like another $100. And so, you know, I'm like, all right, what's the plan? You know? And she's like, well, we have $100. Do you want to get Coke or something? You know, like, you know, I wanted to get heroin, but you wanted to do something else. She's like, you really freaked me out last night when you went out like that. She's like you came really close to dying. So she wanted to get Coke, and for some reason we couldn't get it. We ended up getting a motel room that night, and we didn't have any drugs. We just got like a bottle of vodka or something, and we ended up getting drunk. So that was day 2. The next morning we wake up, and we really have like no, you know, plans for what we're going to do for the future. It's like a day by day thing. My parents are calling me at this point, and, you know, obviously they're super concerned. When you leave rehab, like, you know, I tell them I'm leaving, and then they give you your property back. So I had my cell phone, and, you know, they're obviously super concerned about me. They didn't know that I had OD'd or anything, but they're encouraging me to, they're like, okay, like, there's still time to fix this. You can call your PO, you can explain that you just like made a mistake and that you went back to treatment immediately, and there's a good chance that you're not going to get violated. Of course, my addict mind is telling me that there's no turning back at this point. I mean, I left. That's it. I'm going to be violated. I need to push this run as far as I can, because that's all I have. You know, maybe I can make it a year, maybe I can make it 5 years, maybe I can make it a month. But I knew at this point I was fucked. So we go to a Jack in the Box, and I'm like, hey, do you want food? We had like $7 left to our name. And she told me what she wanted. I went in to order it, and I came back, and we're sitting on the curb, and I'm like, all right, so what do you want to do? I was like, what I think we should do is we should go boost some panties at like a Macy's or something. We'll get them soiled. Brand new market here in Santa Barbara. And she's just like, no. I'm like, okay, well, we don't have to, I mean, we got to do something. We got to get money. And she's like, my dad's coming to pick me up. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, yeah, I already called my dad, and he's coming to get me from San Diego. I'm like, okay, am I going with you? And she's like, no. He's coming to get me, and I just need some time to be with my family right now. I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, are you fucking kidding me right now? I just left rehab for you because I didn't want you to be on the street by yourself. Now I'm in violation of my federal probation, and like, you made it seem like I had to be here to look out for you, and now you're just taking off. You're just going back with your family. You're just tapping out like this, and you're leaving me the warrant for my arrest with no money, completely resourceless. What the fuck is wrong with you? And she's like, I know, I'm sorry. I'm like, oh my God. I didn't even know, like, I was so angry. I didn't even know what to say to her. I could not believe that I got played like that. Like, you know, she had clearly had a momentary lapse of judgment, and then she came to her senses and realized that it was only going to get worse from this point forward. My addiction was still telling me, was still giving me optimism. We'll figure it out. That's like, you know, we'll figure it out tomorrow. We'll figure it out today. That's like the junkie mentality. It's like, you know, it's like for that moment. But she wasn't feeling that. She was tapping out. She wanted to go back with her family where she knew she was safe, because they would always take her back. And my parents were not you have to go back to treatment. And I was so scared to go back to treatment because I thought for sure that I was going to get violated. And I'm like, man, well, you know, and San Diego is like 3 hours from Santa Barbara. So we had time to kill, and I was hoping that I, you know, at least be able to talk her into going with her so I could go stay with her family. And I called my friend Max, and I explained the situation. I said, hey man, and you know, he's someone that I'd been friends with for years. he had had his troubles with sobriety, and he was in recovery at that moment, or maybe he was, I don't know, I think he was just starting to like smoke weed again and do like Suboxone, like abuse Suboxone, whatever the case. I explained the situation. He said that he'd come get us, and he picked us up and he brought us to his place, and he had like a 2-year-old son. And we kind of were just hanging out at his place all day. And, you know, I was trying to convince Haley, like, hey, when your dad gets here, see if I can go with you. Because Max was going to let me stay there long term. He said I could stay there like a week till I could figure stuff out, which made me feel a little better. And I'm like, can Haley stay here too? And he's like, yeah, for sure. It was like, you know, he had like a 2 or 3 bedroom, and he was going to let us crash for a week. But she had already made up her mind that her dad was going to get her, and it just made me so upset. And I remember we got really drunk that day. And the more I drank, the more embittered I got about the whole situation. Like I felt like I got played. And eventually her dad shows up and she takes off. I go and I shake his hand, and, you know, that was it. She just takes off. And I go back into Max's house, and, you know, I kind of drink myself to sleep. I get woken up the next morning at like 7:30 in the morning, and he's shaking me. And he's like, you got to get out of my place, you piece of shit. And I'm like, what's up? And he's like, what is this? And he pulls out a rig, and he's like, this was in my 2-year-old's bath tub toys. And I'm like, we only had one rig. Like, it was a big deal to get that rig, and Haley told me that she had gotten rid of it, you know? So, you know, naturally I assumed that it was hers. I was like, dude, it's not mine. And I didn't even think it was hers. There were a couple other girls that had come over that night, and both of them had a history of using, and I was like, well, it might have been them. Like, why are you just assuming that it's me? He's like, you're always bad news, Ryan. Every time I try to help you, some shit like this happens. All you care about is yourself. You're a fucking junkie. Get out of my place. It's like 7 in the morning, dude. I'm like, I have no money or anything. And I'm like, yo, dude, you need to reevaluate this. What if you're wrong? What if that's not my rig? He's like, I don't care if I'm wrong. Get the fuck out of my place. I'm like, Jesus Christ. And at this point, I get a call on my cell phone from a blocked number. I don't pick it up. I'm just like kind of wandering around Max's neighborhood trying to figure out what to do next. I don't even have a phone charger. My phone's on like 13%. I get a call from a blocked number, and it's my PO. And he's like, hey, he leaves a message, you know, because I don't pick up, and I listen to the message. He's like, Mr. Leone, we were just informed that you went AWOL from your mandated residential treatment center again. Just calling to notify you that if we don't hear from you within the next 24 hours, there will be a warrant for your arrest issued. We need to know what's going on with you. Please give me a call back. And, you know, like, just the reality of it hit, you know. I left rehab for the second time to try to save this chick, or to try to, you know, satisfy my codependency urges or whatever. And she took off. She kind of just abandoned me. And then, like, the one friend that was willing to help me just kicked me out in, like, early 7 in the morning for something that I honestly didn't do. And I just felt really alone in that moment. And now I'm getting and my parents are calling. They're saying I can't come stay with them. I really had nowhere to go. And now I have to figure out something now. And I don't know whether to call my PO. I don't know if it's a trap. I have no idea what's going on. And we will get into that in number 9 in the relapse story. And I will try to post every day so that people don't go in their vaginas. Palabra.